Please welcome to present our final award, the Vasilios S. Haseotes Service Award, Mike Manatos.
Wow, this is such a powerful service every year. I look forward to it. So we're honored to have with us today a member of the greatest generation, Efthemios J. Tim Bentas, and I am honored to have the pleasure of introducing him. When we last gathered at this beautiful memorial in 2019, we honored with the Ochi Service Award Vasilios S. Haseotes for his service in World War I. The words used to describe his remarkable life and legacy were striking. Sister Therese Anton, in her introduction, highlighted the courage, persistent determination, and faith in God and humanity that defined the way he lived his life. She described him as, quote, a faithful member of his church, devoted husband, loving father, loyal American, loving grandfather, and patriotic Greek American. His great-grandson, Harry Murphy, who's here today, highlighted that day his distinctive resilience, adapting from failure, and seizing opportunity from the resources he had. Sister Therese concluded that the legacy of Vasilios Haseotes is that his faith, humility, love of family, and vision define him as a giant man in many ways. These are qualities to which many aspire, and we at the Washington Ochi Day Foundation believe should be highlighted and celebrated every year. So we are now doing that with the Vasilios S. Haseotes Service Award. Every year going forward, this award will, quote, celebrate the life and legacy of Vasilios S. Haseotes by recognizing an individual for their dedicated service in war, as well as their contribution in the spirit of Vasilios Haseotes to the Greek American community, to the United States, and to the world. And how appropriate that the very first recipient of this prestigious award is the man who was lucky enough to marry Vasilios' daughter Lily, Tim Bentas. Tim was born on September 3rd, 1925 in Lowell, Massachusetts to John and Vaitza Bentas, both of whom immigrated to the United States from Greece around the end of World War I. Tim, one of four siblings, grew up in the Greek section of Lowell, where he spoke only Greek until the age of 5, and then attended the Greek American School at the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church of Lowell, where he has been a lifelong member. While attending Lowell High School in the spring of 1943, Tim took a test for the Army Specialist Training Program and enlisted in the military. When he turned 18, several months later, he was called to duty. 2 weeks later, he was at Fort Devens in Massachusetts. For the next 2 years, Tim was at the Air Force training camps in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas. In early 1945, Tim was sent to Italy, where he joined the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, to train for the invasion of Japan. The OSS was the intelligence agency of the United States during World War II, coordinating espionage activities behind enemy lines, including propaganda, subversion, and post-war planning for all branches of the United States Armed Forces. When the OSS was dissolved after the war, its tasks were taken over by the CIA. Just 5 years ago, the OSS was collectively honored with the highest award of the U.S. Congress, the Congressional Gold Medal. Tim was sent back home to Lowell by the OSS for a 2-week furlough before deploying for the invasion of Japan. Tim was on a train en route to Lowell on August 14th, 1945, when the Japanese heard he was coming and they surrendered. He completed his service at the Army's headquarters for cryptography during World War II at Arlington Hall Station just over the bridge in Arlington, Virginia. He was honorably discharged from the military in March of 1946. After his military service, he received his undergraduate degree at Brown University, a law degree from Suffolk University in Boston. He became a district attorney in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, went into private practice with a law firm in Lowell, and specialized in criminal law, retiring in 2015. Much like Tim's father-in-law and the man after which this award is named, Tim Bentas has served his country and his community with great humility, faith, and distinction. Presenting the award today to Tim Bentas will be his niece and co-trustee of the Vasilios S. and Aphrodite B. Haseotes Family Foundation, Zachary Haseotes Vinios. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 2021 recipient of the Vasilios S. Haseotes Service Award, Tim Bentas.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a great orator, but after listening to the speakers, there isn't much more for me to say. So all I can say is that I want to thank, well, my folks, the people I grew up with in the community of Lowell, Massachusetts, that I have to tell you this, we used to have fun with this one. Lowell at the time was occupied, we estimated 40% or 45 by people of Irish extraction. 30% were people from Canada, French Canadians. Third were Greeks, who were 15%, and the Yankees, who were about the same amount. And we used to say, as wise guys, all the rest were foreigners. So, anyway, in my sophomore year in high school, we heard a terrible thing happened in Greece. That some Italian had gone and threatened Prime Minister Manatos because the Italian army was going to come through. They wanted to occupy areas in northern Africa. Well, Manatos, and none of us ever forgot him, told them, Orchi. And the community we grew up in, we knew what Orchi meant. It meant no. So, then when you're 15 years old, what do you do when things like this happen? And we knew what the word Orchi meant. We knew it implied that Greece was in trouble. And then the United States got into the war. So by then I was 16, but I couldn't go in the army. I was too young. But they were given a test in Lowell High School, and you take the test, you pass it, you pass it. So I passed it, and I enlisted in the army, I thought, when I was 17, still in my senior year in high school. Well, that September, I turned 18. 2 weeks later, I was in the army. And I thought, if I had kept my mouth shut, if I hadn't signed anything, I'd still be a civilian. I'd still be running around Lowell. But anyway, a couple of friends of mine came home on furlough for an organization that had been organized and run by a fellow that they called Wild Bill Donovan. It was the OSS. Well, I said, I want to join the OSS. Well, you couldn't join the OSS. They sent me to Wofford College because they wanted navigators in the Air Force. I spent 6 months there taking math courses, and I'm thinking, I'm in the Army. What am I doing taking math courses? Anyway, the Air Force then decided they had too many of everything. They closed down the Wofford College program. So now what do? They send me down to Texas. And I don't know what they were going to do with me there, but every time you went to a different camp, you were interviewed. And I kept telling them all, I want to go in the OSS. And they would laugh at me and say, yeah, okay, we will. Well, about a year later, I was prepared and sent to Italy, still unassigned. Here I am, I've been in the Army now over 2 years. I haven't been assigned anywhere. I get to Italy and they tell me you're going in the OSS. And at that time, they were pulling all the OSS people out of Southern Europe, from Greece and everywhere. And there were about 20 of us. So we said, well, what are they going to do with us? These fellows all went up to the 88th Division, and where they were still fighting. So we get sent to a radio school. Because you're going to be in the OSS, you have to be able to be in contact with the people back in headquarters. So then the Italians surrender. But we still have to fight because there was a fight going on over in the Pacific. Oh well, finish there, and they decide now it's early August. All right, you're going to go home. You'll be assigned from there. So they put us on converted B-17s because B-17s they couldn't seat many people. And there were just a few people on there, and all were like me. We were unassigned now, except we belonged to the OSS. We came through Africa at Casablanca. I remember the movie Casablanca at the time, and I was glad to see Casablanca. I was very disappointed when I saw it, but that's another matter. Anyway, we fly through to Brazil. From Brazil, we get on planes. We fly to America. We land in Miami. Now, we're going to be sent home, 2-week furlough, and then we'll go back to, back to Pennsylvania, where we were going to train for the invasion of Japan. Well, we're on the train, and we're coming to a place called Palm Beach. And we had seen, some of us had seen a movie by that name. But we knew it was just rich people lived there. And they stopped the train. Hundreds of people surrounded the train, everybody screaming. The war's over. It was August the 14th, 1945. We couldn't get off the train, though. They had MPs guarding every gate because they knew half of them wouldn't come back. So we went home, and then they started discharging people from the Army. And the Army had a unique way of doing it. They gave you points for the time you were in the service, the time you were overseas, and if you had battle stars. Well, I had a friend of mine who had been in the Army a year before me. He was 2 years older. And he was in Italy. I had met him in Italy. He was discharged. I said, Tim, how come you're discharged? You've only got 1 year to work on. He said, no. The outfit I worked for, he was a typist. The outfit I worked for was an air coil outfit. And they had, every time there was a battle up in Europe, anywhere, the planes would go up and help in the battle. Well, they got a battle star. Everybody that was in that unit got the battle star. There might have been only 10 flyers, but 30 fellows would get a battle star. So he got out. And I didn't know what they were going to do with me, and I wound up one day, not too far from here, and they said, you're going to Arlington Hall. Well, we had heard that there was a place called Arlington Farms, and that's where all the people, all the girls who worked in Washington during the war lived there. So now we're thinking, here we are, we're 20 years old, 21 years old. There's about 5 of us, and it's very exciting. until we get up to Arlington Hall, we find out it ain't going to be exciting. We're going to be on duty 6 hours a day, 4 different quarters. And so I walking around. It was the Military Intelligence Agency, but even though we were allowed to carry weapons and we had to keep people out of certain buildings, they wouldn't let us walk through the building. So, well, it's crazy. You give me a gun, you tell me keep people out, but I can't go in there. What's going on? So then we find out what was going on. But anyway, we were discharged. So I go home, and this is the part of the war that I'm sorry, I cried, because when I was in the Army, I had 2 sisters, and they'd write to me, but they'd never tell me about the kids I grew up with. I get home, and I find 2 boys that were my age. We went through school together. They never came back. One was an infantryman who fought in Europe. They never brought him back home. They buried him in France somewhere. And the other guy, Costi, was a gunner in the B-17. They got shot down. They never found him. And I couldn't understand why they didn't tell me that this had happened. And their argument was, well, we didn't want you to worry. And the third fellow was probably, in my opinion, next to Harry Aganis, the greatest Greek athlete. And he didn't come back from Iwo Jima. And it was, I'm sorry, 76 years later, and I still get emotional about it. I don't know why. But anyway, I am so glad that they gave me the opportunity to tell people how I feel. I couldn't tell the boys back home because they all came back at the same time as me. They went through the same routine. But the one I really discussed things with, when I met my beautiful wife and we got married, I got to know Vasilios Haseotes, who had been in the First War. He'd been gassed with mustard gas, which they used in the First World War. So I spent many a night and day discussing the various aspects of military life with Bill. Because I couldn't say, well, I got shot here or there, because I didn't. But he did. But he didn't brag about it. He didn't want to talk about that part of it. But we used to sit and swap stories. And I told him about what it was like growing up in Lowell. What it was like when we heard that John Metaxas told the Italians, Ochi. We all knew what the word Ochi meant. And when I first heard about this organization, I thought, gee, it's about time something like this happened. And now here I am trying to impress people. But there's nothing to impress. This is a great, great idea. This is advancing ideas about what it means to be a good person. And the Greeks, now I remember, and most of you probably most of you weren't born, what it was like to hear that Greece was being attacked by Italians. But anyway, and we were all so glad when they got driven away. But then that's where the idea came that I want to join an outfit that'll take me to Greece. And we knew the OSS had sent troops there. By the time I got there, they were gone. And I still felt like I was coming home. And even now, although I haven't been there in a few years, I don't feel like I'm a stranger going there. Because I grew up in a community that was proud of the fact that they had built the first Greek-American Orthodox church in the United States. And they based it on Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And we never called it Istanbul, by the way. It's Constantinople. And I don't know what to tell you. I think about things and I wonder what would have been if the Italians had not said, we're coming through Greece. So, for this, I admire the people that organized this particular organization. And I still think about my father-in-law, because we had conversations that I couldn't have with anybody other than him in that in that age group. And anyway, thank you for letting me bore you.